All right, welcome to Protista Part Dos. We are now looking at the plant-like protists, and the name given to that group is the algae. Okay, that is probably the term we are more familiar with. So, remember, these are plant-like. They are not true plants. They've got a lot of things they share in common, but there are some key features of plants that algae simply don't possess, and so they don't go in with the plants. Although there are some people advocating that at least some of the algae should be put in the plant kingdom. So, here we go. As you may already be aware, there are both multi and unicellular forms of algae. Unlike the animal-like protists where they are all unicellular, in this case they can be either or. They are all, however, photosynthetic. They contain at least one type or more types of chlorophyll, sometimes the same that is in plants, sometimes not. But this, of course, is what gives algae the color that it possesses. And, of course, very importantly, chlorophyll is the chemical, the pigment, that allows plants to carry out photosynthesis. Without it, we'd be out of luck. So, why aren't they plants then? Algae lack true leaves, roots, and stems. Even though some of them may look like they possess them, if you look internally, the structures are not there. So just be aware, just because something looks like something does not necessarily mean it has homologous origins. It doesn't mean they're homologous structures. They may be analogous and not really show a true evolutionary relationship. And by definition, if you find something, I don't care how green it is, if it's only one cell, it's not put in the plant kingdom because plants are defined as multicellular structures. Is that a proper definition? I don't know, but that's the definition, and so that's the framework we're working in. Okay? Alright, we're going to first look at 3 phyla of unicellular algae, single-cell algae, and then we'll look at some multicellular algae. Alright? The first phylum we'll look at is the Euglenophyta, or the euglenoids. Okay? This is a picture of what one looks like. It is just a bizarre little critter. I mean, it is neither plant nor animal. It is both. It is autotrophic and heterotrophic. It has got qualities of both types of groups in this one single-celled critter. So somewhat plant-like and somewhat animal-like. It's animal-like traits that we would normally tend to associate with animals is that when there is no light and it has nothing else it can do for food, it can ingest and digest, just like we would think of with a heterotrophic organism. It can move around. We don't normally think of plants or plant-like things as being able to move around, but this thing can. It's animal-like in that way. It uses a flagellum, which you should be able to see right there if you look. It also can move in a different way by something called euglenoid movement. It's a crawling or creeping type of movement, often done when conditions are not very good. It can, maybe the water is too viscous or something, it can resort to this creeping type of movement. It does have a cell wall, but it is not made of cellulose, so that makes it rather unplant-like. The cell wall, and again, this is really probably not a correct term for that. It's called a pellicle. It's made of protein. It's like what was in the paramecium. It allows for flexibility that you don't normally see in a cellulose cell wall. Okay? Its plant-like traits should be fairly obvious. It's got green stuff. It's chlorophyll. And contained in chloroplasts, very similar to what you would see in a plant. So, of course, it can do photosynthesis, and that makes it very, very plant-like. Okay? Additionally, it has something that actually would make it somewhat animal-like, but it allows it to do photosynthesis. This brownish structure right here is actually a little more red if you get a better image of it. That is the eye spot, and it allows this thing to not see images like you do, but to detect light and dark, so that it can find light and use that to do photosynthesis. So that's a very adaptive structure right there. Okay? Here's just another picture of Euglena. Again, you see the eye spot and the flagellum. It's very hard to see, but it's kind of coiled around right there. Additionally, just so you know, the motion they make with their flagella is a pulling, so this is actually the head end, if you will, of this organism, and it's being pulled by the flagellum. We often think of something like sperm or whatever being pushed by their flagellum, but in this case it's a pulling motion. And here's a diagram of one. Again, we can see some of these structures a little more clearly and distinctly. The eye spot is always near the flagellum end, so if you can find the flagellum, you know where the eye spot is, or vice versa. So we'll talk more about this when we get in class. There's some pictures. We'll talk about those when we get in class. All right. Second group of unicellular algae is an interesting little group called the diatoms. Its phylum name is Bacillariophyta. You notice I struggle with this. We generally refer to them as diatoms. Okay? Unicellular, and they have shells. And you can see that this one's shell. The shells are kind of like a pillbox or a shoebox. There is a top part that sits on top of the bottom part and fits over the bottom part. And so each species has its own characteristic shape of shell and design. They are indeed photosynthetic. They are found in both freshwater and marine environments, and they are hugely important. You need to know this part here. Okay? They make up a large part of the base of the food chain, the phytoplankton, the plant-like plankton in the ocean ecosystems. Base of the food chain. You lose your diatoms, you're in huge trouble. Okay? This is a beautiful microscope image of various diatoms and all the variety that exists in some of their shells. These are some freshwater diatoms that if we examine our freshwater aquarium, we might see some like this. Okay? And that's just an electron micrograph. All right. Now, phylum Dinoflagellata, or the dinoflagellates, is the last group of unicellular algae we'll look at. Okay, these have cell walls. These algae have cell walls made of very thick cellulose plates, so they kind of look like they're armored almost. They come in a variety of shapes and styles, but all of them have two flagella, and they are arranged kind of perpendicular to each other, and so they beat, and the thing really tumbles through the water as a result of that motion. Most of them are marine, meaning salt water. Okay, and they are responsible for a phenomenon known as red tides, which are usually bad news. When a lot of these algae are in one place and reproduce, they can color the water red because they're pigments in them, as opposed to being the green chlorophyll, are other kinds of pigments, and they look red to us. And that is an image of a red tide on a coastline. Okay? I cannot imagine how full that water must be of dinoflagellate algae to make it that red. Okay? Now, some of these dinoflagellates produce poisons. There have been blooms of these in the Chesapeake Bay in recent years that have produced poison and caused fish kills. Okay, one species produces a nerve toxin that can kill fish, and if people eat the fish, can injure people. So there's an example. You can see this kind of browny reddy color to the water here, and these of course are all dead fish. The dinoflagellates look often like something like this. This is a characteristic image of this kind of three-prong dinoflagellate. This is a flagellum coming off, and this is a flagellum right here. It's kind of hard to see, but they are perpendicular. This thing would kind of tumble through the water. All right, now for the multicellular algae, we're going to have 3 phyla of them, and they're basically named after the colors they appear to be. So the first type we have is red algae. All of these are multicellular, so these are big. You would find these washed up on the beach. You wouldn't need your microscope. Okay, these are all marine, meaning all salt water. Okay, all salt water groups. Typically, they're associated with cold water and rocky coasts, the colder water climates. They have structures that would look like roots to us, but they're not true roots. Remember, algae don't have true roots, leaves, and stems. Instead, they are called holdfasts, and these holdfasts allow these algae to attach to a rock surface and hold on there and not be washed away by the waves and such. Okay? The red algae in deep water have special pigments in them, because if you are, here's my water surface, and if you are way down on the bottom, the light that strikes the surface is going to get absorbed by the layers of water until there's almost no light at the bottom of the water. And to collect what light there is, you have to have really special pigments in order to do that. So they have pigment that allows them to absorb very tiny amounts of light that might make it all the way down to the bottom, and those pigments make them look red. The pigments are red in color, okay? Hence their name. Now, the second type of multicellular algae is known as the brown algae. You more famously know these as kelp, okay? You're going to have a box of kelpos or whatever, kelp fries, I don't remember. But anyway, kelp. These things are enormous. This is an image of a kelp forest, and quite appropriately named. These things can be 60 meters tall and create truly forest-like environments underneath the surface of the water. They have structures that help keep them supported in the water. Now, in a tree, you expect a hard tree trunk, but in these algae, what you find is that they have a hold fast to anchor them to the bottom, a leaf-like structure, a stem-like structure. Whoops, this is not this leaf-like structure, my bad. I can't remember if these are stems. I mean, one of them is a stem, and I just can't remember my terminology. I'm sorry. This is the leaf-like structure here, but this is the one I want you to know, the air bladder. The air bladders, you can see just barely there. They're little balloons full of air. Why do they need those? To keep that kelp upright in the water so that its blades, these leaf-like structures, can be reaching up to the sunlight. They do have chlorophyll, but they also have a brown pigment, hence they are called the brown algae. Okay? This is a beautiful picture of the blade. Here's the blade, here's the stem-like, but again, it is not a true stem structure, and these are the air bladders that keep the leaves and the plant buoyant and reaching up towards the sunlight. Okay, this is another image of kelp, but this one is accentuating the hold fast that anchors it to the rock so that it doesn't get washed away in the waves. Okay, and we will take a look at these photos in class, these movies in class. All right, the last group of multicellular algae, perhaps the most important group of multicellular algae, the green algae, phylum Chlorophyta. Why would this be the most important group? Because it is thought that members of this group gave rise to plants eventually back in history. Of course, their major pigment is chlorophyll, and it is the same exact chlorophyll molecule we find in land plants today. So these are thought to be the ancestors to the plants. Most green algae live in fresh water, though certainly we do have marine or saltwater forms as well. We are going to look at a colony, a colonial green algae called Volvox. When we say it's a colony, it is not a truly multicellular organism with true tissues and so on. It is more a group of individual cells kind of living together, but certainly there is some differentiation of labor. There's some parts of the Volvox that do different jobs than other parts. So it's colonial, but it is bordering on a multicellular structure. This is a Volvox that we'll be looking at. It's microscopic, but it is still multicellular. Each of these little dots is an individual cell. They are connected by strands of cytoplasm. And what happens is at some point one of these cells decides, oh, it's time to make some babies, so it starts dividing. And contained within this mother colony, which is this whole big thing, a daughter colony will begin to form. And then when it's ready, the mother colony will open up and release these daughter colonies into the environment. Each individual cell that you see here has actually got 2 flagella coming off of it. So it produces a spinning motion, and these Volvox just tumble and tumble through the water. Okay, they're really interesting. This is showing you the individual cells here. They are connected by webs of cytoplasm. As you can see there, it's almost like a little scaffolding. And you can also see that they would have eye spots in each cell. Why would they want eye spots? So they can find the light and do photosynthesis. Okay, and we'll look at these images during class, so we're just going to kind of skip over these for right now. All right. Now, there are other multicellular green algae. For example, there are marine varieties, saltwater varieties, and this is one that I want you to learn because we're going to see some of this when we go to the bay. It is called sea lettuce, and it's just a sheet of this green tissue. It would have a holdfast, but often we find it washed up on the beach, so it's very flimsy, so it would have torn off of its holdfast and just washed up on the beach. Photosynthetic, common in the Chesapeake Bay, so you need to know that one. All right, I'm going to skip this because we'll look at this in class. And now, last but not least, well, actually least, because we're not going to do much with these, fungus-like protists. It's really a stretch for this group, but we'll talk about it anyway. They are multicellular. They are decomposers, which is probably what makes them most fungus-like. There are 2. There are slime molds and there are water molds. Let me see. This is an image of a slime mold right here, quite colorful. A water mold, I should have gotten a picture. I'll show you one in class. But if you have ever owned fish in an aquarium and seen the fish die, well, you didn't see it for a couple days, and then you came in and oh, it was dead, and it had this white fuzz growing off of it, that is a water mold. Okay? Now, slime molds are really unusual in that they can be somewhat animal-like, is that they can creep around and engulf food items, and they're big. I mean, it's like the blob going across the forest floor. But they are fungus-like in that they do make spores like fungus do to reproduce. So, at any rate, that's about all we need to know about that. So that's that. That's the protists. We're hopefully going to do some labs in class, assuming the little critters come in time. So catch you in class. Thanks a lot. See you soon.